I'm Daniel Marques. I'm a product designer, and today I'm going to give you some tips about design and some quick things that you can do. A little bit about myself. I'm a product designer right now at Sourcegraph. Before Sourcegraph, I worked at OutSystems, and this is to say that I've worked with developers both as an end user and as colleagues pretty much my professional life. And one thing that I notice around developers is that they think they are not good designers when they are. It's just like they use different tools to design things, which is code, but the mindset is essentially the same. And if you follow a bunch of like quick tips and basic rules, you can get like pretty good results, so you don't need to overthink it. So in this session, I'm going to give you 10 hacks. I kind of regret calling them hacks. They are more kind of like safe bets that you can always use that pretty much work. And then we have pizza and beers, so it should be pretty quickly. By the way, is there any designer in the room? Okay, that's kind of good, because I'm going to speak in absolute terms, like never do this and always do that. Obviously, like take that with a pinch of salt, but it's just like to simplify the communication. So first thing, text, always use narrow text bodies. So if you have like a big paragraph, always try to make it like narrower. I know that today we have like wider screens and we try to optimize the space to use all the resolution or to put items on the left and on the right. Forget that. Just optimize for readability. We humans, we need like a set of like 45 to 6 words per sentence, so it's easy like to jump from one line to the other. Otherwise, like if you try to go to the next line and you have like to scan all the way to the left, you kind of get lost and it's not really user-friendly. So narrow text bodies all the time. Another one is avoid background images at all costs, especially if they are controlled by the user. So imagine like cover images or something, and then if you need to display text above them, it's going to be pretty much a nightmare. There are some things that you can try to do, like play with gradients to optimize the readability or whatever. My suggestion is that like avoid that and just go for the plain and simple white background. Keep the image, it's going to look fancy, but don't try to be clever, and just go with the simple stuff. So white background always works. Next thing, this one is a quick test that you can do to evaluate the complexity of your application. So let's see, we have this pretty complex table with a lot of information, and let's say that in this use case, we really want the user to focus on this active state. And you can tell that we have a lot of visual noise. In order to see if like that active state is actually like very visible, you can just like blur the image, pretty simple. Like this TV is not the best, but you can really tell like what are the most visible elements in this image. So you have a lot of visual noise created by the photos. So maybe if photos are not important, you can like either desaturate them, make them smaller, or remove them. If you really want the active state to pop, like it's kind of working, but let's say that in your case, you are worried about like these actions. You want the user to focus on these actions. And you can see like when you blur, and like this is a way of seeing what your brain focus on, you can tell that like these actions really like get lost. So this is a quick way of testing the visual complexity of your elements, and depending on what you're trying to do, like this is a very cheap way of doing. It's kind of like an eye tracking test, but like you can do this in 10 seconds. So it's a really nice way of working. Next thing is white space. I think this topic is pretty simple, but a lot of developers or non-designers struggle with, because they think like the way that all of this was spaced is kind of like magic, and it was done by the eye and just feeling. And it's actually not. So the first thing that you need to think about is content. So in this case, and if we apply the same technique, you can see like we have like one group here and then two smaller groups here that are kind of like together. So if you think about this in kind of like a a data structure, you'd know about data structures. So it's the same thing. You have like one big group, the identification, then the details with two smaller groups. So if you apply some math to the spacing, it's going to be pretty simple. So you have like 60 pixels on the main groups, and then half of that for the second group. And then for the corner radius, the same thing. So all of this spacing has logic behind it. You just need to think about like the content and the grouping between all of the elements. So that's it. Like white space, it's a really powerful tool to help with readability, but it's not like anything related with filling. Like there is some logic behind it. Another one, this one is kind of funny, is still like Facebook. So you all know the feature of stories on Instagram, right? The company that came up with the stories first was Snapchat. And then Facebook tried to buy Snapchat. They didn't want to be bought by Snapchat. So Mark Zuckerberg was kind of like, okay, let's just copy that feature entirely, pixel by pixel, and put that on our products. And this is what happened. Like, this is the number of stories on Snapchat, and this is on all of the Meta products. So my point is, if they can copy something that works from their competitor, you can do it too. It's fine. So just check out other design systems. There are a lot of great design systems. Just use what they have, or just use the default things that the browser provides. So don't try to be clever. Just copy, steal. It's fine. Everybody does it. I do that all the time, so it's all right. Another thing, fonts. Don't overthink text. It's super simple. I'll leave you with two suggestions, Inter and Roboto. They have a lot of like font weight, so you have a ton of flexibility. But even before that, you can just go with the system UI font on your CSS, and you'll be fine. Like the operating system already has like pretty good font choices, so don't overthink it. Don't try to use like 2 or 3 different types of fonts. Serif fonts are, like they work, they are amazing, but they are not really a safe bet because they have some tricks to it. So if you want to play safe, just go with the simple solution. These are my suggestions. Icons, same thing. If you are starting a project, and by the way, I'm giving these tips probably more for side projects or whatever, because like big projects, I'm assuming that you have a designer that you can work with. But if you are creating like a side project or whatever, just pick an icon set that is extensible as much as possible. Like in this case, we have like 7,000 icons, so you'll be pretty much covered, and you have a ton of like flexibility. And the idea is that if you select an icon font on an icon set that has plenty of icons ahead of time, you don't need like to create a specific icon or import an icon from a different font that is going to look all inconsistent. So pick something that has like a broad range. Material design icons it's a very famous icon set. Font Awesome is another one. But try to be clever about this and keep to the same choice as much as possible. Feedback. Feedback is also a very important thing that your interface needs to provide to the user. So for instance, in this case, if I click Add to the Team, I as a user, I need to understand that the system understood my command. And this is kind of like basic human interaction. You see like on professional kitchens, when someone asks for something, they always respond with, yes, chef. That is not about hierarchy or about respect or anything. It's about communication. Like the other person needs to understand that the command was understood and received. It's the same thing. You are talking with the computer. If I click Add to the Team, the computer needs to say to me, I've understood your command. And this is that kind of thing that you can always like, my point is that feedback is always a good thing. So for instance, in this case, you can go even further. And for instance, add a cursor not allowed on over. So you have like 2 types of feedback that the system is processing, and the system doesn't really want you to click on that button again. Because if the backend is not properly defined, maybe you are creating 2 requests and they conflict and whatever. So just add points of feedback as much as possible. They are never too much. This is a personal pet peeve of mine. I really hate pie charts because I think that most of the time they are the wrong choice. And especially because like we humans, we are really bad at comparing like lengths on curved shapes. So for instance, in this case, like support is 30%, R&D is 25. But like if you don't have these numbers, you really struggle to understand like if they are kind of the same or a little bit bigger or not. My suggestion with pie charts is if you really want to use them like for just like 2 series. Like for instance, on a soccer game, you have ball possession. It's like one team or the other. Like it's a 50-50 split. That kind of works. I still think there are better ways of displaying it, but a better option is to just go with bar charts. Like in this case, and even if you put them horizontally, you can line the label with the bar and with the actual number, and you can read everything in the single line, as opposed to kind of like processing this and trying to see the relations. Like this is a mess. This is pretty much way more easy to read. It's not as pretty. I'll give you that. Doesn't look as fancy on a dashboard. I'll give you that, but it works. And my point about this talk is like choose stuff that works most of the time. Don't try to be clever. And I'll say the same thing to a junior designer, like don't try to be clever. And the last thing, another pet peeve of mine is like center text is probably always the wrong choice. Again, same thing. It's really hard to parse like one line to the other because you like this alignment. And like the ends and the beginnings are jumping all over the place. It's almost certainly the wrong choice, so never try to do that. And just go with left align or right align if you are working with a language that's right aligned. So summary, don't overthink it. Functional and simple is always better than flashy and unusable, unless you are just like displaying a screenshot on a marketing page or whatever. But if you really want your product to be usable, go with function and simple. It's not black magic. Like these are all sets of learnable things. Like there is math involved. There is like logic behind all of these decisions. You can always copy from what works. Like everybody does that. Every designer does that. That's how we build our careers, to be honest. So that's fine. And embrace the learning process. Again, like this is super easy stuff. And once you try to understand the reasons and the principles behind this, you'll be able to see great design everywhere. And you will be able to reverse engineer these things and understand like from great products. So that's it. Thank you so much. Let me know if you need any more tips. I'll be around. And if you have questions right now, just let me know. That's all right.
Hello? All right, working. So, any questions?
No questions. Just straightforward, I think.
Okay, we have one back there.
In the table you showed, the first one. Yeah. What is the tips we should follow if we have too much actions in the end? Like instead of 2, like if we have like 5 actions, what should we do?
That's a great question. And I'm going to give you an answer that I don't like, is that it depends. So is there like a main action within all of those? Is there like an action that is rarely used? Because you can always like defer actions that are rarely used like to an overflow menu, and you kind of like click them and you have like a drop down with them. But if if you put in that menu actions that are needed like on a day-to-day basis for that user, like that's an extra click that's not really user-friendly. So it really depends. You can put everything into like an extra menu, like on a drop-down or something. That kind of works, but that can also be very user hostile. So it really depends on the task that the user is doing. Like on the example that I gave you, like if you really, like if the status is the most important thing on this table, it is fine to be like as green as it is or even bigger. But if like the most important thing is the role, because this is an HR application or whatever, maybe this is reversed. And maybe like you don't even need the photos or maybe the order. So it really depends on what you are trying to do with the table and what are the user tasks behind it. So yeah.
Anyone else?
Not so much a question, but more of a comment. In terms of material UI, what I've noticed is a lot of times you're basically replacing an icon with rather than text. So it doesn't really give you the feedback because you have a plus button, and what the heck does this plus button do?
Yeah.
Does it create an event? Does it create something?
Yeah.
So I really don't follow why Material UI did that. It even goes against what Steve Crow says about don't make me think. It should just be text because I don't want to guess.
So in that case, on material design and other design systems, there are always like forces at play, and those rules that they create at Google, they need to serve like their own products. And sometimes like having a plus button on the contact list or whatever is kind of obvious like what you're trying to do. What I'm saying is that might be fine for their products because they think about it and they design that material systems that design system for themselves. But what happens is that when they put that out there and people try to use it like at face value, like you're saying, like they follow their recommendations, and personally, I think that's a bad thing. Like I always like to go on the safe path, and like you said, like if you have an icon, pretty much like all the time you should have a label unless you have a good reason to not have it. So yeah, like some components on material design might not be the best, but even then, if you really like trying to do your own design by chance or going with material design, even though there are better design systems, like some sort of guidance or principles from any design system is already better than nothing, I think. So yeah, but yeah, there are design systems that are not perfect, definitely.
Anyone else? No? Okay.
Awesome.